Welcome. This is a lecture series. Please have paper and pencils ready to take notes. Please be ready to pause the video when I ask you to do so. You will be expected to take very good notes on this series so that you can use your notes when you are given assignments later. Let's get started. Today we're going to look at Standard 8.3.R.1. This is the Oklahoma Standard for 8th grade, 3rd Standard, Reading .1. The standard is written as students will analyze works written on the same topic and compare the methods the authors use to achieve similar or different purposes and include support, including textual evidence. Please pause the video and write down this definition now. Let's break down what this particular standard is talking about. What they're really wanting you to accomplish is to compare and contrast a couple of different written items to learn what the author wants you to know. You're going to look at how the author wrote in these different items to see how they got their point across. For example, you might consider that an author may write a story and then produce it as a movie. They may have many similarities, but they also may have differences. For example, these on the screen are examples of books that have been turned into movies. You may also compare and contrast one particular author. For example, what did John Steinbeck write? He wrote The Grapes of Wrath. What else did he write? He wrote other pieces of fiction such as Of Mice and Men. So you might compare what the author wrote in two separate pieces of literature, but they may have a similar theme. On the screen now, you're going to see a sheet that a teacher may give you. It's a compare and a contrast with a summary. There are many different ways to do comparisons and contrast, but if you'll notice, there are many places for you to write notes. That's your evidence, textual evidence. How is something alike? You would make a theme, and then you would make a evidence position, drawing from the text that you have read. For example, let's look at a work of fiction. You might ask yourself some of these questions. Please pause the video and write down the main things, such as what is a main idea or theme, what is a setting, who are the characters, what are the conflicts, how are they resolved, and what is the plot of each. Please pause the video now. As I mentioned before, you could take two completely separate works of fiction that one author has written and compare and contrast them, asking yourself these questions. Now let's look at nonfiction. You may pause the video and write down these questions you can ask yourself for nonfiction, such as what's the main idea of each one? What is the subject of each one? What is the scope of each one? How is each one organized? And what is the author's purpose of each one? Here are some other methods for comparing and contrasting. You can find similarities and differences between text in organization, treatment, scope of ideas, and theme. We are going to break down these 4 different pieces of vocabulary to understand their meaning now. You may stop and write these down now, or you can wait until we get to each one on the next following screens. Let's start with organization. Organization is the way ideas are organized or structured in a passage. I would like for you to pause the video to read this definition and then summarize or paraphrase the definition in your own words. Organization is very important. Once we identify how something is organized, it will give us a better idea of how to compare or contrast it. Let's look at the next point. Treatment. Treatment is the way the ideas are discussed. It's how things are put out there for us to understand. Take, for instance, how somebody may treat the topic of death seriously in one passage or text, and then in another passage they may treat it as light or funny even. Can you think of movies that may fit this example? Can you think of books that may fit this example? Pause the video now, read the definition, and summarize it or paraphrase it in your own words. Let's discuss scope. Scope is how thoroughly an idea is covered in a particular passage. So let's think of it this way. Scope. Think of a mall. A mall is a very large building and it contains many stores. I could talk about the mall without talking about an individual store. Then you could have somebody who may be more narrow in scope and talk about just one store in the mall or one kiosk in the mall. That would be a much more narrow scope and cover only one area of an idea. So it can be broad or it can be narrow. Please pause the video now, read the definition, and paraphrase or summarize in your own language. Let's talk about theme. Theme is the overall message conveyed in a passage. Think of it this way. If somebody asked you what a movie was about and they wanted you to tell it in 1 or 2 sentences, that would be the theme. It is what the overall idea is that the author wanted you to have after you have read through the passage. Please pause this video, read the definition, and paraphrase in your own words. Let's talk a little bit about textual evidence. Remember when I talked about the evidence back on the slide where we did the compare and contrast worksheet? Evidence is very important. You can make a statement of what you believe a passage is about or how it's different or how it's the same. But just those statements alone are not enough. You must provide evidence. You will find that evidence in the reading passages. For instance, if you wanted to say that the theme from John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath, and the theme from Of Mice and Men are 2 totally completely different stories, what evidence would you use? You would use evidence from the stories. This book is about this. This book is about that. So you would use an overall theme in that instance to support your theories or your opinions. You have to use evidence in your reading passages to support your conclusions from your analyzations. Please practice these skills and then take an assessment, do your assignments, and make sure you've ensured mastery of this skill. Let's look at the skill one more time. This is the standard, 8.3.R.1. Students will analyze works written on the same topic and compare the methods of authors used to achieve similar or different purposes and include support using textual evidence. Thank you very much.